We started talking Canfield. We can go right into Canfield too, and let's go right into the preview.
Perfect segue to Canfield.
There's two offensive linemen that were departing. We got Michael Minock and then Nick Hugo that are going to be departing off of Canfield's first team. So there's a couple holes offensive line. Returns on Canfield's second team offense. Michael Crawford at running back, Brock Lowry at quarterback. We already said that.
Boom, boom.
That's your 1-2 punch too. And boy, were those two dynamic on offense last year too. Absolutely dynamic.
Because Brock Lowry is so good at running the ball, and they have that read option working so well, and he can throw it. So it's almost a triple option.
Yeah. We go into the defense. We mentioned Chris Amarone was the AAC Defensive Player of the Year last year. He's going to be departing linebacker, one of the best in the area, as well as Ethan Fletcher, a very good defensive back. Toby Smith, though, defensive lineman, is going to be returning. And I know Toby Smith from my younger years, and I watched this kid grow up. And boy, when you talk about a kid that went from like this big at like 3 years old, and now he's like, oh my God, this kid is bulked up, and he is going to be a terrorizer on the defensive line, as he already is. Already got a first-team honors, too, in junior year. I expect the same success from him this year. He's an absolute terror on the defensive line. Run stuffer, too, at that. Also, Canfield, too, before we get in, we'll go into the second-team defense, too. Conor Fritz, linebacker that's departing. Luke Morrill, a defensive back that's departing, but a returning linebacker in Drew Carcerone, I think, or Carasay, I think. Let's see what I got his name on. Yeah, Carasay. So, I mean, you got some returns, but you got a little bit of departure. But like we said, Brock Lowry is going to be the biggest return, I think, for Canfield. And I think it's going to be the motor behind Canfield having another successful season.
It's going to be on defense. Like I said, it's going to come down to that D-line and how much they can establish their dominance. Because if you have a really strong defensive line that can break through offensive lines, it can really hide some youth in the back of your defense. And that's where Canfield is going to be the most young on defense, is their secondary. So if they can really dominate up front, stop the run, and get to the quarterback pretty quickly, then they're going to be able to hide some of that youth in the back of the secondary.
As we look at some big games, too, from Canfield, I would bid you to find a bigger game August 19th at Poland, but there's another team in Canfield that will probably argue that they have a bigger week 1 game than Canfield and Poland. But nonetheless, Canfield and Poland, huge week 1 game at Poland. Battle of 224, Anthony. You can't ask for anything better week 1.
The storyline for this writes itself, because it's Pavlansky versus Pavlansky on their father's field, and it's already the big rivalry. It's going to be packed, standing room only. You can't ask for much more as a football fan. I mean, if you're not watching a specific team on Thursday night, and that's the other thing, it's a Thursday night, so a lot of casual fans might just mosey on down to Poland to see that game. I mean, I don't think we can talk about how big of a storyline that game is going to be. Bragging rights on the line because of the big rivalry, but also bragging rights on the line because it's brother versus brother. And then you look at the matchups, and you look at, like, Poland is that tough nose, we're going to run it down your throat. We're going to have 2 fullbacks in the game, power eye, and Poland's running the ball a lot. Canfield's the opposite. They want to attack. They want to move the ball quick. They want to throw a little bit more than Poland, so it's going to be a game of tempos. Very interesting matchup anytime 2 teams that are good at things that are completely opposite go up against each other, and you try to see, especially in the first quarter, who really puts that tempo on the other team more.
Yeah. And I mean, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you and I are on the same page. We expect both Canfield and Poland to make pretty decent playoff runs too, going into the postseason. So these are going to be 2 just very talented teams, 2 of probably the most talented teams in the area that you're going to see bright and early week 1. I mean, this is going to be a fantastic week 1 matchup, and it highlights a bunch of fantastic
week one matchups. Fun. Week 1 is so fun this year because almost all the rivals are just going to play each other week 1 instead of at the end of the season. We're going to see a lot of matchups that we were really wanting last year that we were going to get this year. Week 1 is going to be fun, but definitely the appetizer for the full Friday night of games is that Thursday night game between Canfield and Poland.
Yep. Looking at these other games too, we wanted to do 2 big games for each team in the AAC. And Anthony, you pretty much would not let me get New Philadelphia off the hook on this. And you wanted to talk about this, so I'll let you talk about this September 10th game at New Philly.
Well, we talked about this game specifically with Mike Pavlansky last week on this show. He wants this team to travel, and New Philadelphia is a heck of a bus ride. I believe it's about an hour and a half, maybe closer to 2 hours from Canfield to New Philadelphia. You are taking a trip, and you're making that trip worth it because New Philadelphia is a state powerhouse. I think it's so important to make those trips, because in the playoffs, you're going to be making some trips if you make a deep run. So great foresight by Coach Pavlansky to decide to make those trips and get his team used to making a long trip once in a season. And this one's going to be maybe the biggest trip of any area team takes this year, going almost 2 hours away to New Philadelphia to a stacked New Philadelphia team that is kind of hungry, because I believe Canfield beat them in Canfield last year.
Yeah, and I mean, Canfield in general has a pretty tough schedule going on this year, but I mean, if Coach Pavlansky would have it any other way, I don't think so, because I mean, he's going to power up this schedule, make his boys go through a gauntlet, so that, just like you said, Anthony, they're ready for the postseason when it rolls around.
In this 16-team postseason, I don't think he cares if they're not undefeated. Like, of course, you always want to go undefeated. You want to win every game. But if they go into the playoffs 8-2, but they are so prepared because they've played this gauntlet of a schedule, I think Mike Pavlansky would be sitting pretty.
Well, yeah, and you make a great point, too. When the playoffs expand now you don't need to worry necessarily. Obviously, you want to win every game, so we're not taking that away from any coach before I say this, but it's not as much of a detriment to you if you lose that one game or if you lose those 2 games on the schedule, because you still have a great chance to make the playoffs. And we all know once playoffs start, you just got to be there. And then once you're there, anything can happen from that point on.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that you get a top 5 seed. That would be great for a Canfield, because I don't think Canfield wants to dip below 5 in that Division 3.
You don't want to have to be an away team going somewhere to face them. Yeah, absolutely. You want to
week 1 of playoffs, everyone up to the 8th seed will be hosting this year. But then all of a sudden, you're right on the road the next week.
Exactly. And that's what you want to be home as much as you can. And being in that top 4, top 5 is most likely going to get you at least 2 home games out of that. And you want as many as you can going on deep playoff runs.
And I got to say, I think that if Canfield goes 8-2 with that schedule, then the top 5 is not anywhere out of the realm.
I could definitely see them finishing, within the top 5 with an 8-2 schedule, especially how tough their schedule is, and knowing how Joe Eitel does the points and everything. You might see them get some points too.
Especially if they win the right games, because different games give you more points.
Exactly.
They win that New Philadelphia game on the road, that's going to be a lot of computer points for the Cardinals.
Yeah, and it might be a situation too where 8-2 or 7-3, but one of those wins is New Philadelphia might rank you a little bit higher, or maybe the same as an 8-2 team.
And then as soon as you play a team, you better be rooting hard for them, so you get as many computer points
exactly
as possible.
It's fun, man. It's fun how that whole thing works out, and you got to start rooting for your opponents too, that you just beat up on.
You play New Philly, you get that win, you leave, and then you say,
I hope they win the rest of the games.
Win the rest of the season.
Yeah, win out now, so that way I could get ranked a little bit higher for the playoffs. But no, those are the 2 huge games, I think, for Canfield. And I mean, it's just another one. This AAC conference is going to be fun to watch, man.
Do you want to just just go down their schedule? And just kind of list out what their schedule is?
I mean, with as tough as their schedule is, we could absolutely pull up Canfield's 2021 schedule and just take a peek down it. I mean, obviously, we know that August 19th game is at Poland. That's week 1. You go August 27th versus Dover. That's going to be at home.
So you go rematch from last year, by the way.
Yep. Cleveland JFK is at home September 3rd. September 10th, we know, is at New Philly. This is going to be an interesting game. September 17th versus Cheney. Cheney's one of those teams, and we'll get when we start previewing the Steel Valley. Cheney's a team that I'm very high on, and I think that they're going to be up and coming here in the next few years. But that's going to be, I think, a very good game. Marion Pleasant, September 24th, they're coming to visit Canfield. Then you got October 1st versus Fitch, October 8th versus East, and then they finish the season October 15th at Howland and October 22nd at Boardman. So 3 of the last 4 games are conference games.
Yeah.
For
and they missed. I mean, I either I missed it or they're missing the Harding. Harding's not on that schedule, right?
Harding is not on this schedule for them. No, so it's just it's Boardman, Howland, and Fitch, but they're playing them 3 out of the last 4 weeks, so that's going to have huge AAC implications too towards the end. And I mean, you look at it too. I mean, head to toe, the schedule from Canfield, it got a pretty tough schedule too. Some repeats from last year, and we know how many good games they had last year. I
love that they're bringing in Pleasant too. I mean, bringing them to Canfield.
I know that is hilarious that they're coming all the way in, but I mean, it's great too because I mean, it's a chance for people around this area to kind of check out those other teams too. And I mean, it might be worth it too if you're in Canfield that night. Go grab a ticket, go check it out.
First 2 games are on a Thursday, the rest are on Fridays. But once again, it's going to be interesting to see them on Thursdays those first 2 weeks, being able to draw in some of the casual fans that don't have other football games to go to.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of odd that first week you said too that such a huge game against Poland. You would think you'd want that on a Friday night because of work schedules but I don't think that's going to be an issue at this point. I mean, you can have it on a Tuesday night. It's going to be a packed house.
The thing about now that it's on a Thursday, all the lights just go whoosh.
Yeah.
I mean, right to that game.
Yeah, and I think, and you know what, I think that's why they wanted to do it, because when you talk about, having people show up, because you want sold out, you want to draw as much as you can, but this is a game that's going to draw regardless. This is a sold out game in the making, no matter what day you would have put it on. And
I talked to Pav earlier this week, and this was interesting. I didn't know this, but this is the first time they've ever opened with Poland, opened the season with Poland.
Really? I did not know that. That's incredible too. In their entire history, this is the first time that they've ever met.
No, not the first time they ever met.
Week 1, obviously. That's what I meant. Yeah. First time they've ever met week 1.
Well, you think about it, rivalry games are usually towards the end of the season.
Yeah. But still, out of all those years through the 20s and everything, like not one time did they not play each other.
According to Pav, he said in our interview, he said that was the first time that they're opening the season with Poland. And that's,
just to highlight it again. I mean, this is the beautiful thing about sports.
Is it an advantage though? Because you needed a scouting report on Poland. Everyone changes every week, but Poland is not a team like Pleasant or New Philly that you almost don't know anything about. Like, what schemes Poland is running. They've run the same schemes for a while. And that's it's like, I know it's a new coach. You're going to try to get
from the schemes. They're brothers. People talk to each other about each other's schemes. They've bounced ideas off of each other's head with both being coaches. This is 2 teams that are going to know exactly what each other is going to be playing. And they're just going to have to punch and counterpunch each other the whole night.
Here's another interesting thing, though. It's such an emotionally big game because of the rivalry for both teams. I'm interested to see for both teams, and we'll talk more Poland when we dive in the 88 later in the week. Both teams, how they respond the 2 or 3 games after that. Because if you win that game, obviously you're going to be feeling really high about yourself. Do you ride that roller coaster a bit too much in the week 2? And then obviously if you drop that game, are you a little bit too much in the valley to get up for week 2? I talked to Pavel about that too. It's very hard to bounce back from a really strong emotional game in week 1 and get right ready for week 2, no matter which way that game goes for the teams.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you bring up a really good point in that you want to try to win this game because it's going to set you up for the next week, and the loss is really going to be a test of character of your team, how well you have your team coached, how well you can get that game out of their heads, because, I mean, this is a game that we've been talking about since the beginning of the summer, since we knew that Pavlansky was hired, since we knew this was on the schedule. Everybody in the area has been talking about it. So it's in these kids' mind. It's in both coaches' mind right now. They're going to be talking about it. But one thing I will say, Poland last year, if you don't remember, lost week 1 against South Range.
They did.
And they never looked back from that point on until the playoffs. So Poland is a team that we saw last year. They got that first week loss, but they were able to battle through that adversity, figure themselves out. And
you know what? That's a very good point because, South Range isn't like a Canfield rival But that's a big game in the NE8. I mean, everyone knows last year it's pretty much coming down to South Range versus Poland.
Yeah.
So to open week 1 against them and to fall in that game, and really not even it was pretty domination by South Range. I think Poland scored late to make the final score a little bit closer, but you look at that game to bounce back from that. Maybe Coach Pavlansky isn't too worried about how their team responds from that first Canfield game, whether they win or lose.
Yeah, and like I said, it just seems like they responded well. It's hard to say with Canfield because they went undefeated in the regular season, so we don't know necessarily how a loss would affect them. You wouldn't think that a loss is going to affect either of these teams too much because, like we said, we expect both these teams to make fairly deep playoff runs too. Even discussing state championship wise, I think both of these teams can definitely be in the discussion for the respective divisions. But yeah, I think both these teams, it's going to be interesting to see how they do react to it because some team's going to have to lose.
Right.
Yeah, right. So someone's going to have to lose here. And I mean, like I said, with these teams, the coaches, Pavlanskys have talked to each other. They know somewhat of each other's schemes, so they know what each other's going to be running. And you're going to probably see some trick plays too. I would think this game, plays that you're not expecting.
The discussion at the Thanksgiving table, if like the first play from scrimmage, whoever gets the ball first runs like a trick flea flicker play.
Yeah, I would love nothing more. Put it all out on the line week 1.
Sit there like, what is wrong with you? First play, trick play. Really? We're doing this? All right. Cool.
We need to get like a bragging rights show with the Pavlanskys, so whoever wins and whoever loses, they're able to like send a message to each other on YSN or whatever. We could have it up on our channel, like the winner's message and the loser.
We talked about it. They have to root for each other, which is easy.
Pretty much. So yeah, give a good luck clap to them for the rest of the season and say you got me.
Can Canfield Nation ever really root for Poland?
I don't think that's as hard as it gets, man. I mean, geez, oh man.
It's kind of like
asking a lot to ask a Canfield fan to root for Poland right now.
It's going to be one of those things where they just hope, like, if they win, they're not upset about it, but they're not going to actively root for each other.
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe if it means one of them gets seated higher at the end of the year and they have to root for one, you might see them quietly root for it, but they're definitely not going to be audible about it. They definitely do not want to root for each other's team at all.